President Donald Trump delivered a combative speech before the United Nations General Assembly as it convened on its 80th anniversary. He began his speech after a small technical snag with a teleprompter and a hello to his wife Melania Trump. In his hour-long address, Trump spared no criticism, beginning with his predecessor, former President Joe Biden, before taking aim at world leaders on everything from migration, energy, to the Russia-Ukraine war. The president then turned his attention to the United Nations, accusing it of not living up to its promises and even accused it of bringing in more problems. On the conflict in Gaza, he accused member states of rewarding Hamas by recognizing Palestinian state. He demanded Hamas to release all the remaining hostages. This is what he talked about at the UNGA.
I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action. China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products. Unfortunately, Hamas has repeatedly rejected reasonable offers to make peace. We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities. The world's #1 sponsor of terror can never be allowed to possess the most dangerous weapon. That's why shortly after taking office, I sent the so-called Supreme Leader a letter making a generous offer. I extended a pledge of full cooperation in exchange for a suspension of Iran's nuclear program. The regime's answer was to continue their constant threat. By the way, they're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive. They're not strong enough to fire up the plants that you need to make your country great. The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad.
Our correspondent Susan Teherani has sent us this report from outside the United Nations headquarters in New York.
The United Nations marks its 80th anniversary this week as world leaders converge on New York for the General Assembly. But the mood is grim. Wars in Ukraine, Gaza, and Sudan dominate the agenda, while the organization faces a budget crunch and questions over its relevance. Diplomats now wonder whether the United Nations is in freefall, with its humanitarian work threatened by cuts and donor fatigue. Still, the gathering, often called the World Cup of Diplomacy, brings together more than 140 leaders, including from the United States, Russia, China, and across the Middle East, in a rare moment of global focus. As one diplomat told WION, if not at the UN, then where? Susan Teherani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
You're still on that. Addressing the 80th United Nations General Assembly in New York, President Trump went on a tirade against the United Nations in a speech that lasted 55 minutes, more than 3 times the permitted time limit. Trump blasted the international body and accused it of not living up to its potential. Trump complained that the United Nations has only given him 2 things: a bad escalator that stopped midway while he and First Lady Melania Trump were at the United Nations headquarters, and a teleprompter that malfunctioned when he started speaking.
It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter.
Father Trump lamented that while he solved 7 wars in 7 months, some of which were unsolvable, the United Nations made no attempts to help him finalize a peace deal in any of the cases. In a dig at the United Nations, Trump remarked that empty words don't solve wars, only actions do. Trump ruminated on a 2-decade-old grievance that his bid to renovate the United Nations headquarters had been rejected. He further criticized the United Nations for failing to bring peace and claiming the world body encourages illegal migration and is funding assault on Western countries and their borders.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders.